welcome. Summer here, and I thought that it would be a good time to introduce you to a few of my friends who are doing some pretty cool things and get them in front of you if you're in a school. And before we kick off, I want to acknowledge a few things. First up, that I am here presenting to you on the lands of the Wurundjeri people and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Kulin Nation, and know that we build on the traditions and the stories and the networks and the customs of centuries and centuries of citizens. And also acknowledge that so many of us are doing all sorts of living and learning and socialising from our lounge rooms at the moment. And I know that it's been a pretty heavy ride for a few of us. So just acknowledging that if you're here and you're hanging out with us, that's awesome. Also, if you're watching this later, that's awesome as well. I know that you're going to find so much goodness from these folks. What we're going to do is just have a bit of a chat as if we were all sitting around having a bit of a Monday afternoon drink together. I'm going to share with you the kind of golden thread that comes between them, and so that you can get to know them a little bit better as well. So this is a collection of a group of people that are doing amazing things in their industry. They're doing some fantastic things in their kind of lane of knowledge. And I've for a really long time thought, oh my gosh, these people would be amazing in schools. Now, Andrea works in a lot of schools alongside me, and, you know, she's kind of my bestie in learning. So I wanted to make sure that you met her as well, but she's got some really important things to share. Of course, we've then got some others who haven't worked in schools before, and if you're quick, you can snap them up. So I'm going to bring them into the room for a bit of a chat and a hello with everyone. And then I'm going to have a bit of a one-on-one chat with each of these people. Hello, Andrea. Hello, Ben, Mike, Kelly, Jasmine, Rachel.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Good. It's like that new show, The 100, except it's like the 7. It's just I love that. So look, this group, it's interesting to me because obviously Mike and Ben know each other. They work together with Real Life Resilience. They know each other really, really well. I met Mike when I was at a class at Mirasuna, which is the most stunning wellness retreat. Sally, in a minute, I'll get you to describe it. Basically, think about this, you know, you're off to a yoga class, you kind of chat with other people that are at the yoga class. This is how Mike and I met. And we were like, oh, we should sort of, you know, hang out and find out more about each other's work. And of course, he works with Fabulous Ben as well. So Sally, I know through my new beautiful yoga studio, which is located conveniently near my house, that I was only able to buy with the assistance of Rachel from Bloom Capital. Rachel has since worked with some students that I work with at Camberwell Girls Grammar School. Rach works on financial intelligence, and she's really been changing the game for sort of some of the upskill things that they do there. So Rach really changed my life. A former Camberwell Girls Grammar School student is Jessamy, and Jessamy runs an amazing consultancy called Think in Colour. She is a graphic recorder and does amazing things. Jessamy and I worked together for probably about 3 years now. Different clients get her in, or, you know, we work together on different projects, which is awesome. And I know she's also worked on projects with Andrea and some of the great strategic well-being initiatives that she does with schools, particularly across that Geelong region. And of course, that cycles back to the fact that Andrea and I are besties. So you can kind of see this golden thread of all of these awesome people, which is really, really cool. And so I would really like to start the conversation, Andrea, with you. I'm going to pop the others out for a bit of a rest at the moment, and I will be bringing you in and out. But Andrea, let's start off with a little bit of a howdy, bestie.
Hello.
How are you going?
Good, Sam. How are you going?
Yeah, good. I know that you've been doing a lot of writing. What are you doing there, mate? What are you doing?
I have been doing a bit of writing this year, which has been really nice. I think there's been, you know, one of the silver linings, if we say, out of the kind of what's been going on. And I've also had a baby, so that's also helped with being able to fit in some time to do some writing.
Nice.
Focusing really heavily, and I know some of you know because you've been working on a lot of this stuff with me too, focusing heavily on a type of well-being that we call eudaimonic well-being, which is a lot more about meaning and purpose and authenticity and personal growth, kind of challenging, I guess, perhaps how we currently design curriculum to teach wellbeing skills, challenging that and kind of redesigning the landscape, if you like, to be more about contribution and cooperation over competition. So that's been really exciting.
Yeah, it's been really fun to, I guess both of us have learning design sort of, you know, things that we do. And for us to be able to say, well, we're actually better together has been really fun. And I know that it's changed business, and I know that it's just made us stronger as a collaborative as well. But I love this idea of the eudaimonic. It's like I'm finding meaning through the struggle. So I actually kind of embrace it a lot more, the meaning and the purpose, rather than just the sort of, you know, simplicity of look for the positive. And I think that there's really something in there around like going through some of the tough things gets you to the other end. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, one of the sayings is growth requires doing the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, if you look at the way education has evolved over time, it's kind of become more in the 21st century about that self-fulfillment element for our young people, whereas we need more than that. We need to acknowledge that, you know, those negative emotions are a fundamental part of life. They help us grow, help us sit with them and not sit in the fear so much, but try and be more sitting within, you know, awareness or presencing in order to be able to navigate, become more adaptable, which in turn creates resilience. So yeah, I think it's a bit of an untapped area, and certainly one we don't focus on as much, broadly speaking, in education. And I think there's a lot in this space that we can really integrate to create more well-beings.
Yeah, absolutely. More well-beings. Now, of course, I want to bring in like everybody here right now, but I actually want to bring in Rachel from Bloom Capital, because this whole idea of that sort of, you know, self-fulfillment that Andrea is talking about, the concept of adaptability, this is something that you're really, really key on through Bloom, but, you know, through your conversations just in general. A funny-ish story about meeting Rachel. I met her sister first, and I said, she said, oh, I'm going off to Bali next week. Andrea runs amazing wellbeing retreats through Bali when she can. And I said, oh, look, you know, I would love to think that I could have this kind of life of self-fulfillment. It's just really hard with everything going on. And Rachel's sister said, look, I think you should talk to my sister. She's all about this idea of this sort of financial intelligence, this idea of you're in charge of your own life. And Rachel and I got talking, and obviously the results were good. But Rachel, why is it important to understand this from a tangible element right from when we're really young?
Good question. I think it's important for anyone at any age to understand money, and it can be a little bit of a taboo subject, talking about money. I don't personally think that it is. I think it's important to understand it from a young age, that it isn't taboo, and that it also is important not to rely on others for you to get through life. And you know, money doesn't bring you happiness, but it does give you a lot of opportunity. So I think it's important to understand it and how to grow your wealth. And I think it's important from a young age to know that you can't always rely on our parents to get us through either. So
it is. That's super important, isn't it? Why I love like this kind of connection is, Andrea, I know that you're very much around this kind of compassed approach to that sort of sense of, you know, fulfillment and well-being. And that's what I really loved in my meetings with you, and what you've been doing with students as well, Rachel, that it's not saying, oh, you've got to kind of just focus on wealth and it's these bits and pieces. It's sort of saying like, what's the life you want to create, and how this can be a really important part for you to struggle with and then not struggle with, and then have, you know, a really good sense of self. So that sort of whole rounded life is what makes Bloom a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, we talk a lot about emotional intelligence a lot at a young age, and I think financial intelligence is just as important. Like I said, to be aware of where you can go and how your finances can support you, from things like a simple everyday bank account and how that can help you grow from a young age, to savings accounts, and that would eventually take you on to saving for a mortgage. So, I mean, the mortgage is my end part, but there's a lot of steps to get there, I think.
And you think that's a mindset, but it's a skill set as well, this financial intelligence, and that can be taught to young people?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be taught. Yeah, definitely. I think it's empowering to be taught to young people, because then they're like, yeah, I can do this. I don't need to rely on anyone else. I can do it on my own. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. I love the work that you have been doing with students around that kind of opening up that conversation, teaching them how to open up that conversation and have that, and then just some really key tangible skills that can start really basic but then grow. We talked about the idea of, wouldn't it be cool if every young woman in particular, every student that was about to graduate, had that financial intelligence and had that kind of mentor or that person and that tool set to go further down the track with as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think I remember being like 18 and I was like, how do I get my own Medicare card? And I know Medicare is not the same as buying a house, but it's all kind of collective. It's all learning things that I mean, back in the day, I had Dolomites from Commonwealth Bank on how to save, but I don't think they do that anymore. And I think it's important to have a holistic view on that and how to do it on your own.
Nice. All right. Well, with this, I want to bring in Jessamy. You can see that I'm just starting to build my network here. Jessamy, you're very much around a really targeted skill set. Now, you've been working with me in teaching active deep listening, in teaching nonverbal communication to students across the Northern Territory and also here in Victoria as well. Rachel's been working on a really particular skill set. So have you. What are the kinds of things that you do? Why is it cool? Well, you don't have to tell me why it's cool. In fact, Andrea is going to tell us why it's cool. And can I show people this other screen?
Go for it. Sure.
Oh, amazing.
So this is just a little, so I'm a graphic recorder, first of all, which basically means I spend my time eavesdropping on other people's conversations with their permission and drawing it in pictures. So I spend most of my time working pre-COVID in workshops and conferences, and now it's mainly online, the same sorts of workshops and events, pretty much anywhere people are talking. And I'm taking a capture of the information that's being shared using a combination of words and images, and that's what we call graphic recording. Sometimes it's called graphic facilitation. You might have heard of it as sketchnoting. It's all basically the same principle, which is this deep listening, on-the-spot synthesization, and synthesis, I should say, and translation of words into pictures. Much better with the pictures than I am with the words.
Not true. But it's such a cool skill. And we've had students who have gone through your online course, which is an awesome online course, and they've come out the other end with a professional credential, because it's such a skill that you've been able to teach that they're now kind of professionally wanted. That's cool.
The work that has been coming out of Camberwell Girls in particular has been incredible, and it's wild for me because I went to that school. I'm still a little surprised that they let me back in, but I had a real trouble with taking notes when I was at school. I feel like it's something I was never taught how to do. I didn't understand what I was meant to be doing there. And there was the element of it that was missed for me was this sort of on-the-spot synthesis and knowing what was important to capture and what wasn't, rather than trying to just desperately jot down absolutely everything. And as a visual thinker, which honestly we all are, whether you think you are or not, that's just how we're wired. Using these visual tools, even really simple things like how you use color, how you use shape to chunk and organize information in a way where you can actually see the relationships between things, suddenly the ball's dropping and you're actually understanding the information that you're taking on rather than just trying to copy it down. So it's so awesome for me to see this coming out of Camp World Girls now, when, you know, that's a place where I really struggled with this and now I do it professionally. Nice full circle.
Well, I know one of the girls as well, and I'll see if I can find it, but Rachel, she did a whole graphic recording of a session that you actually gave as well. So distilling some of those main points was a real gift for you as well, I'm guessing. Like, to always see that, I'm always like, oh,
I loved it. I printed it out in color, laminated it, and it's in my office. I loved it. I loved it. Like, they drew me with a little bun and my glasses and my pearls. It was amazing. It's so creative and incredible. I loved it.
It's so such awesome. a mind-changing skill. And I know for the kids in the Northern Territory, they're thinking a lot more around the simplicity of distilling skills. So Jessamy, I know you've got your online course. You do that facilitation as well with teams. Andrea, you've worked with a team that Jessamy has done some work with as well. Can you give me a bit of a sense of how that works together?
Yeah, I'm just loving everything Jessamy's saying, because it's just so true, that whole, bringing things alive using the visuals. One of our phenomenal innovative partner schools down here, Lizure Catholic School in Torquay, we did we've done a fair bit of work together, but they came up with their own ways of being, or touchstones, if you like, and this came out of a quick appreciative inquiry process that we did, which was very much a strength-based approach to change, which included all stakeholders, so all of your staff, educators, learning support officers, school leaders, and after that, so Susan, one of the superstar prints I get to work with, contacted Jessamy, and she put together these amazing visuals, which was basically representations of, so this is the language of Lizure, the first part. So that kind of showed their language that they use now. And then Jessamy also did their touchstones, which were visuals, which were kind of, if you like, similar to values or ways of being. But just phenomenal, because I think one of the hardest things is, you do all this great professional development and all this excellent co-creation, and you capture voice and you co-design, and the most difficult part is often then you leave the room and you want to bring that alive. You want to make it become lived, and you don't want to forget about it. And I think when Jessamy puts together these amazing visual representations, it captures not only everyone's words and thoughts and reflections, but also it becomes a living document that then can be used. And I know Lizure Catholic School, the one that Jessamy just put up, they've actually done an entire mural, a big wall in their school with that illustration on it. So you walk into the school and you see that. It's very much alive. And their touchstones as well are used as a visual around the school too. So I think it's really powerful in helping that message to transpire, but also be really lived within that community too.
I love that so much. Now, I do want to go into spaces. So in the interest of keeping our screens kind of not so crazy, Andrea, Rach, I'm going to, and Jessamy, I'm going to pop you guys out because there's 3 others that I want to pop in, and then we'll all come back together at the very end here. But I'm very, very keen now to hear from Sally, because this is a space that is unbelievable. Mirasuna is the most gorgeous studio you could ever imagine. And I think that sort of talking that Andrea was saying around the creating purpose and creating meaning, and that sort of ability then to have well-beings. I know that that's what you created Mirasuna for, well-beings. You're trying to make me a more well-being as well. What's your philosophy, Sally?
Oh, absolutely. My philosophy is really, and my idea of Mirasuna is really that we're all so busy in this world, and no matter what job you're in, it really seems like we're always trying to do more with less time, less everything. And so there's gonna come to a point where you start to have to make these trade-offs, and those trade-offs might be your own health. It could be your relationships, your hobbies, your own downtime. And unfortunately, more and more people are having to make these trade-offs. And what happens when we live like this is essentially we just live in this zombie autopilot mode where we're just working non-stop, or when we're not working, we're looking after other people. And so there becomes very little time for us to disconnect and come home back to ourselves. And when we don't practice doing that, because mind you, we're very good at doing that when we're kids. We are so incredibly in touch with ourselves as kids, and we wear our hearts on our sleeves and we express to the world how we feel. But all of that gets shut down somewhere along the way. Showing that you're stressed is a sign of weakness. Showing your emotion is a weakness, apparently. Like, you know, this whole thing about how men don't cry, or, you know, there's just so many stereotypes that we subconsciously have to conform to be able to fit in. And so Mirasuna really is this safe haven and this space, whether it's online or physical, where it's about people reconnecting with themselves and reminding you and each other that this is part of who we are as human. We can't keep going every day because we're not robots. We have to disconnect. We have to come home to ourselves, face our experiences, maybe the past that hasn't been so comfortable, be honest with ourselves with some feelings that maybe aren't so positive. Like, we could be stressed, we could have anxiety, whatever it is, it's about honoring where we are at and who we are. And, you know, in the context of schools, I'm passionate about working with education, and pretty much have been my whole life when I was even working in a tech company, is because I feel like children and students, they're not taught how to embrace themselves. Especially as a 14-year-old teenager myself, I felt so much pressure to conform to what other people were wearing, how other people were behaving, and somewhere along the way you lose a part of you, and then that doesn't stop. You go to uni, again it happens again. You get into the workplace, it happens again. So my mission is to give people that safe space to really come home to who they really are.
Nice. I love that this conversation kind of come into that creation of spaces. You know, Rachel was talking about that space for those wealth conversations to be welcome. Jessamy's creating the spaces for people to listen and interpret things in different ways. Of course, Andrea's creating spaces within strategy as well. And I want to bring in Mike and Ben here because I met them, well, I met Mike in your space here, but creating space for you know, a story and for learning as well. These guys have gone through some pretty gnarly things and have created then this offering to really kind of contextualize and make it an offering where it's not just a story, but it's a set of tools, and that's what you've given us at Mirasuna, Sally. Mike, I'd love to hear a bit more about real life resilience, but also how it's kind of tied into the story so far as well, and that importance of supporting teachers to not only do this for themselves but also for their students.
Yeah, and families as well. I mean, there's a lot of parents out there probably stressed at the moment in Victoria. Thanks so much for having me, Sam, and for Ben as well, my amazing business partner. So I guess to kick off and to set a bit of context, we started our business together at the very beginning or just prior to the pandemic. So it wasn't the greatest time. So individually, we'd spoken in schools and in corporates around the topic of resilience for many, many years. But then we became great mates, bumped into each other one day, or I guess for lack of a better term.
That's it, literally.
Yeah, literally. Ben can share that story. But as I said, coming back from our backgrounds or our respective backgrounds, coming from a place of pretty significant adversity from a young age. So when I was 18 years old, I contracted meningococcal disease when I was on a footy trip to Tasmania, and literally what felt like overnight, I went from being totally able-bodied, happy, healthy, fit as a fiddle to lying in a hospital bed after a 5.5-week coma and waking up to the sobering news that I'd lost both of my legs, one of my legs and most of the other. And that was absolutely shattering, life-changing. And I spent the next 6 months in hospital and eventually was able to go home, but I really didn't know where to from then on. And I'll pass over to my amazing friend and my co-founder, Ben Pettingill, to share a little bit about his journey, which I am in awe of every single time I hear him tell it, and just the way he goes about his life too. He literally is, lives and breathes resilience. So, Benny.
I think he talks me up way too much, to be honest. But thanks for that, Legless. No toes,
That's
whatever.
what friends are for.
Exactly. So, no, we like Mike said, we're absolutely great mates. But more importantly, we share the same attitude. And Mike, as he just shared, he's been through his own adversity, very similar, but in some ways very, very different to myself. I actually lost 98% of my eyesight overnight when I was 16 years old. So up the back of science class in year 10, not a worry in the world, and just had a slight headache one day. Had that gut instinct, that intuition that we all get from time to time that something wasn't quite right, and went to hospital to get it checked out upon sort of mum's strict instructions. Mum sort of stressing out more than she probably should, but that's just mum for you.
What mums are for.
Exactly. So, yeah, there we were, getting all those tests done and staying overnight just to make sure everything's okay, and waking up the next morning and I couldn't even see my hands in front of my face. Overnight it was gone, and 2 weeks later we got delivered the news that it was a rare genetic syndrome that was incurable and I was going to be blind for life. So when you combine that adversity, what that does to a 16-year-old teenager in terms of crushing childhood hopes and dreams in an instant, but also raising all these questions, self-doubt, lack of self-confidence, all this stress comes into our life. And Mike went through the similar things. When we got together and when we break it down, yes, they're two very, very extreme challenges and two very extreme levels of adversity, but at the end of the day, challenge is challenge. And students in this day and age are facing that many challenges due to the changes that are occurring. And the issues are the exact same. It's coping with stress. It's self-esteem. It's dealing with distraction and uncertainty. And that they're topics that Mike and I are super passionate about, using our stories, but also using the tools and strategies we've learned along the way to help them through.
Yeah. And all that seems very, I know it's set in context, but it seems very serious. We like to have a lot of fun along the way too. So Ben and I like to take the absolute mickey out of ourselves, rip and do each other as you might have heard before. It was a bit of a throwaway line, but he does call me no toes. I don't know if you heard that one. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, cheers, mate. So yeah, brutal, yeah. And obviously I take the mickey out of myself too. So a lot of the question, what's the benefit of having no feet? Well, you don't have to deal with things like tinea, those sorts of things. Right. But to be able to have a bit of a laugh and set a bit of a context and say, no matter what happens to you in your life, there is always a way through. And as Ben touched on very well, a few points and a few things that they're dealing with, students these days, and as well, it's not just students, it's teachers as well. We've had teachers on the phone right throughout the pandemic in tears, many. We have great relationships with schools, but then also parents as well. You're speaking to just friends and they're saying, geez, this whole homeschooling stuff is driving us mad. So Ben and I, we're really passionate about doing what we can to help out in this situation in an area and a group of people that really need it the most. And whilst they're extreme stories, it's just that's where it begins. It doesn't end there, and we're able to use and draw out some of those lessons learned through that experience that to really give people some, like you said before, some tools and strategies they can use. There's this great saying that we had the experience, but we missed the meaning. That would be the biggest tragedy through this time, to go through everything we've gone through in the last couple of years, but not take out the really valuable and rich learnings, which both Ben and I have learned to do over many years.
And I love that you also, you've gone through so much where you have extracted meaning, and then you are still going along to Mirasuna for the everyday sort of saying, there's professionals that have got amazing skills. Like, it's not just because I've done this, I've learned it, I'm good. I'm going to bring Andrea back in here as well. I'm going to bring Rach in. I'm going to bring in Jessamy. You can see that, like, I need Andrea so much as a quasi business partner. Jessamy and I help make sense of things together. Rachel as well, I'm constantly texting her rando stuff about things that worry me, that she's like, I'm super pro at that. Like, you don't have to be concerned about that. It's almost like creating your own board of directors. Just because you're really good at what you do doesn't mean you have to do it by yourself. It's so much better with friends. And Andrea, I know that so much of what you were saying with Mike and Ben, in particular is about that sense of adaptability, that it's all about that creating the meaning and purpose. And that's why it's so rich and useful. It's not there saying go and have a hard experience and then, you know, you'll be better on the other side. We know that there's lots of people out there that tell a big story, Mike and Ben and Andrea and Sally and Rachel and Jessamy. We know them all. And you sort of go, oh, well, what's the takeaway tangibles? This is what I love about this group. They're tool-based. They've got good stories, but they're clever people with big hearts. And to put them in front of, you know, anyone from executive to kiddos, there's going to be something that's so enriching and so fulfilling around as well. And, you know, every one of these people as well owns their own business and runs their own business. And I just think about my 2020 and 2021 in running a business as well, and how much you need that financial intelligence, how much you need that kind of co-pilot, how much you need somebody that's super invested because of their passion into your wellness and well-being, how great it is to keep contacts and find those ways that you can collaborate like Ben and Mike and I. And of course, Jessamy, you're always there to help make sense of things and to really that co-facilitate. We're even on Monday in a workshop together, and, you know, honestly, COVID was like domino, domino, domino. We were on a call to the Northern Territory. They went down mid-workshop. New South Wales went even deeper. Victoria went into further lockdown and curfew, and Jessamy's on the other side like, everything's on fire, but this workshop is great. She's still cheering me from behind. You know, I'm remembering like, what would Sally have me do right now so that I don't have a stroke? And, you know, it's all about that teamwork. And that's why I just think it's so great to be able to introduce you all to, you know, the world that I work in with schools, some of you so much more deeply entrenched. And I suppose in that sort of final part here, and I know Kate Manners, who's one of my besties as well, has asked, can we be resilient and vulnerable at the same time? Like, absolutely, of course. So I would love everybody to share a bit of I know it's addressed to Mike and Ben, but we've all got something to add in there. Think about that, resilient and vulnerable, and then to think about, you know, that not elevator pitch. We're not pitching anyone so much, but in a nutshell, you know, what is it that you can kind of go in and really offer people right now and maybe into the future as well. So I'm going to start with Ben on that response. Then I'm going to go to Mike, and then I'm going to choose from there.
Beautiful, Sam, and great question. Absolutely love that question. And I share the exact same answer, which is absolutely you can be resilient and vulnerable at the same time. And I actually think it takes vulnerability to build the strongest level of resilience. And the story I want to just really, really quickly share is probably one of the toughest moments for me wasn't when I first lost my eyesight at 16. It was actually 2 years later when I had my 18th birthday, which was meant to be this significant date, key to independence. I'd broken my ankle and it was just this really low point. But for 2.5 years, I hadn't cried, I hadn't opened up to anyone, and I was trying to be the strong one. And it wasn't until I actually said to my dad one day when he said, oh, hey, mate, how are you going? How's your day at school? That I completely broke down and said, this sucks. I wish I could see. I wish this was different. But a weight lifted off my shoulders. So that vulnerability allowed me to become more resilient because it showed me the importance of speaking to people and supporting one another and how valuable that is. So I think from real life resilience perspective, what we can offer at the moment is we want to support all of you teachers out there that we know are doing such an amazing job in such a challenging time. So you can actually jump on to realliferesilience.com.au where we've got a 4-part video series for yourselves that you can share with your students completely free called The Game Plan that will support your students in the key areas that we've been talking about today and help them build resilience in a time that we all definitely need it.
Yeah, legend. All right, Mike, what are your thoughts on resilience, vulnerability, and anything else you wanted to add in there about real life resilience?
Yeah, I think I echo what Ben says. You know, the idea of being authentic and vulnerable when you're telling stories. Like, we have signature stories that we tell, sure, but I remember, you know, making a decision very early on is when you no longer can feel the emotion and the impact that story has on you when you're telling it is the moment you sort of hang it up. So constantly thinking of ways to engage, and I think that if you're not feeling it, then it's not really it's no longer a good story to move on with. But as Ben said before, at the moment, dealing with everything that everyone's going through with the pandemic, that resource that we can offer at realliferesilience.com.au covers really, really practical topics and comes with a downloadable worksheet. So, for instance, some of the topics are around building and having a strong regular routine, asking for help, building momentum, and also a really great one, plan something big. We've got to be looking forwards. We know that the pandemic will subside. We'll get on top of it sooner or later, I'm sure, or I hope, fingers crossed. But yeah, planning something big for the future, it's really important that we have things that we're looking forward to right now, and putting in things in place that are in our control that we can actually achieve to get there and achieve that and see those goals that we set ourselves. So yeah, that's where I'd definitely encourage people to get along and have a go at that.
Love that. I'm planning a big snack order. It's probably not what you're thinking there, but hey, go big on the snacks or go home, I say. Thank you for joining us. Stay there because I want to ask this same question from a bit of another angle from Rach. That kind of vulnerability, resilience, probably thinking about that in a bit of a business sense. And we know that at the moment, these really tangible things around, wealth and finance can paralyze us as well. So what can you offer?
Well, I can offer an ear to listen to, a shoulder to lean on. I can help people navigate through, teachers in particular, navigate through the stress of finances. Yes, although we're all lucky enough to still have our jobs, it still can be a very stressful time. So I can provide advice or tell you what you can and can't do in terms of your mortgage. For kids, I think it's a holistic thing in terms of bank accounts and savings and how you make the next step or getting a job and all of that.
Yeah, nice. And I just love, I think a bit of a thing from some of the girls that you've worked with as well. They love seeing you as a thriving business owner as well and love your kind of career story there. So I think in terms of Rach, she's said, yeah, give her a call. Like, don't flip out about these things. Like I sometimes do it, 3 a.m. or like, in the bottom of the shower, like, oh my God, is everything going to be all right? And Rach's like, absolutely. And here's why. I'm not just going to tell you everything's okay. Here's why. But booking in those virtual workshops as well, getting some of those, questions from your seniors one-on-one as they're about to transition, that's a really great gift there too. So Rachel, thank you for the work you've been doing with some of, my students or students that I'm working with in some of those client schools, and certainly with what you've been doing with me as well. So Rach is definitely your go-to. You've got an awesome Instagram account through Bloom Capital, but you're also on LinkedIn as well, yeah?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Bloom, Bloom Capital, Instagram, Facebook, all of the things.
Yep, fantastic. All right, Jessamy, resilience and vulnerability, my friend. I know that you run Creative Mornings Melbourne as well, so you've heard lots about, vulnerability from there. Any thoughts on that? And also, what is it that you can help schools, corporates, anyone with at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly on resilience and vulnerability, it's interesting. Last year, I did a leadership course that was based on the work of Brene Brown, who was all about vulnerability. And as part of that, I have got these not pre-prepared, just always stuck to my computer. These are my top things I'm reminding myself of all the times: to be authentic and to have positive impact. And these are my sort of guiding stars. And you can't do either of these things. You can't be authentic without being vulnerable, and you need to have resilience to have positive impact. So one can't exist without the other as far as I'm concerned. And what I sort of offer, obviously there's live graphic recording, there's an online course, there's other teaching and facilitation, but really what we're doing is teaching people skills in communication, in listening, in understanding, in sense making, and in new and different ways of communication. I think in a world where stuff is really confusing and things can be really fraught and conversations can be really hard, if you've got a different set of tools in your tool belt to help you sort of actually look at information, chunk it together, identify what the relationships are, both for yourself and to communicate that to other people, that's a really, really great set of transferable skills in your day-to-day life and your professional life moving forward.
I love that. Your Princess Trust has just said hi. We work on Achieve Fest with Prince's Trust together as well. I'll give you one example apart from the kind of courses. I had to give an online presentation without much notice last year. You might remember this one, Jessamy. And rather than sit there for a couple of hours and create slides, I knew the content really well, and Jessamy came on board with me to do a live graphic recording. So that might be one really great way for saving your resourcing, etc. Obviously, try and book her as ahead as you possibly can. But certainly that was a really good way to go about that. So thank you for your reminders in vulnerability and resilience and everything that you've done so far. So check out Think in Colour. She's got an awesome website, and it's going to be even more awesomer soon. But
yes, thanks, Sam.
All right, Sally, I know that you've had a big lesson in resilience and vulnerability in starting Mirasuna and creating this beautiful urban retreat, and then it never being open due to COVID. What are some tips, for you as a business owner, but also some of those things that you actually can tangibly offer the community right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, launching probably for the 6th or 7th time after this current lockdown, so wish me luck on that one. I think resilience and vulnerability, they've got something in common. They both require you to dig really deep. And neither is possible unless if you come home to your own center of truth and who you really are once again. And so if we use mindfulness to, if we apply mindfulness, we start to become more honest with who we are and how we're feeling. And only when that happens can you truly be vulnerable, because you're acknowledging the deepest and darkest feelings that you have, that the surface you or the ego you feels maybe ashamed or embarrassed to have. So it's really important that we do practice mindfulness, practice resilience, really get to know who we are and honor that, be comfortable with that, and like the person that we are. Otherwise, there is no embracing anything. We can't embrace our vulnerabilities. Yeah. And when it comes to resilience, it really is about applying the right mindset to it. And in the way that I teach, I call them antidotes. So when you're feeling something that isn't so comfortable, what is the antidote for that? And it really is about understanding the law of impermanence and knowing that everything always changes, but it's how you rise above it. And it's your attitude, it's your grit that creates your resilience. And none of that is possible if we don't search deep within ourselves, if we don't dig deep. So if you guys are interested in learning more, I'm totally happy to be contacted via Instagram or the website or LinkedIn, because I love creating tailored workshops or even courses for students, teachers, corporates. I just do a lot in that area. So totally happy to hear from anybody and tailor something unique to your audience.
Nice. And I know that Sally's doing that online and also in a beautiful South Melbourne studio as well. So, old bestie, Andrea, you and I always, love a bit of a final word here as well. I know that you are really booked up until kind of mid next year, but working alongside schools and executives, working really on deeply embedding wellbeing into their strategy. I can almost see this kind of alignment here where you've got that sort of sense of like financial wellbeing as a tool. I can see then that, you might even run something alongside Sally at Mirasuna where, active mindfulness, but also getting Jessamy to come and make sense of it all. And of course, if they're working with Ben and Mike on maybe, some really tangible kind of stories, you can see that like we can all come together here. But I know that you're working on so many different things. You've got a really good stance on vulnerability and resilience. And then, what sort of things are you able to offer in schools before we kind of all come together for a final farewell?
Just to all the others as well, it was just so great to hear all of you talk. There's so many things that just for me were just ping ping ping. Mike and Jessamy as well in particular, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about authenticity, that piece. Like there is no way we can be resilient without being vulnerable, without sitting with those emotions first. And I think sometimes the real challenge is that we feel like to be resilient we have to put on a brave face and act like everything's okay straight away. And that's absolutely not accurate. It's important to sit with those negative emotions. It's important to process. And there's been some phenomenal research, which I'd be really interested to see if Mike and Ben's thoughts on this, that has been done on, the most resilient people over time. They did this longitudinal study across 2 decades in Hawaii. Emmy Werner was the researcher that did this work, and they ended up finding out the 5 things in common that these young people that had been through absolutely horrendous situations had in their lives. And I'll relate this back some to our work in particular. They found that it's not just about the internal resources that you have. It's not just about the social and emotional learning skills you have. It's about the external resources as well. So those conditions around you, such as a charismatic adult and things like that. So spirituality, spark, meaning and purpose was really big. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge with young people in particular, it's about as much co-creating those conditions for thriving and resilience. Not just teaching someone to just, yep, this is how you just move on. Putting those amazing things around them to support the individual. And the authenticity piece is everything. I think that's part of eudaimonia. That's the cornerstone of well-being, if you like. If we don't have that, it's really hard to show up as ourselves and be our best. And that comes back to what I think it was Sally was saying before. It was just really great to hear everybody talking. And I think now, being more relevant than ever, we have to be cultivating compassionate communication. Yesterday, I just had to step away from social media with everything going on in the world and people turning against each other. And some of you summed this up beautifully at the start. Everything is interconnected. We are all interconnected. And sometimes we might not agree with what other people are thinking or feeling, or we might not even like what they're thinking or feeling, but trying to have some degree of empathy and cultivate compassionate communication is really fundamental. So I guess this comes back to the work we do, which is on building ecosystems of well-being. It's thinking about culture design, environmental design, curriculum design, all of those things that shape us that we can't necessarily see as well, and creating some kind of strategic direction in how we enable those things to come together, if you like.
So cool. I could not be more proud to know all of you. And if anyone wants to get in touch, obviously you can Google these guys up. They've got all of their own sites, or just pop through me and I will put you in touch. I hope to be able to host another series of this as well. I'm pretty lucky to have lots of other clever mates too, just so that we can flood young people's lives with great people and great messages, and great spaces, and of course, lots of smart people. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for your generosity of responses, and importantly, thank you for the work that you put out into the world. As Andrea said, it's all about how you can build that kind of external network of tools and resources. And personally, you've all been a big part and continue to be. I'm not, saying this now. Continue to be a big part of my learning and my life as well. So thank you all very much. I will make sure that I put it out across all of the socials where you found this in the first place, a link to find these amazing people, book up their time, make sure that you get them in front of your parent community. If you're a corporate as well, get them in front of there as well. And of course, if there's any other supports that you think, that would be really fun, I've probably got some in my networks as well. So let me know and I'll do another one of these as well. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a really fabulous afternoon.
Thanks,
guys.
Thank you.
Great to meet you all.
Take care.